is a Q&A, but I'm going to provide a little bit of context first. And this is also, trying to explain a little bit the nature of reality. This is what I call like recreational metaphysics. It's kind of like engaging with metaphysics is kind of like an exploration of consciousness. So what I say may or may not be true, but it might generate some interesting sensations. So it's something like who is behind kind of like trying to control reality? Is there a God? Is there kind of like anybody who's like fully in control? It doesn't seem like it. One interpretation is that there's actually kind of like a number of, let's say, like super intelligences that are like behind kind of like wanting different things, but they're not capable, any one of them, to actually succeed and conquer like all of reality. In fact, they kind of like are in this like game theoretical equilibrium where if any of these entities kind of like tries to conquer all of reality, the other ones gang up to prevent that from happening. And you know, they're kind of like made of consciousness in a very peculiar way, in that like they have like transformed their own awareness in such a shape that they can kind of like form these huge hive minds, you know, but they're really kind of like, they transform their own consciousness at the kind of like quantum level to be able to interlock with it. So what I want to say is like, yeah, there's one of these is called 5, and it's relatively friendly with humans, and we might need its help pretty soon, because in 2027 or so, there's another one kind of like called 3 that is just very, very, very different. I mean, quantum mechanics with 3 is just like, it's kind of like this hive mind that is very insectoid and doesn't have cells. It just has kind of these like open parabolic kind of like energy bodies, and it doesn't even form into spheres. It's a very strange form of life. And so we're going to be protected by 5 from kind of like the transformation of reality that comes from that one. Okay, so questions, anybody?
What?
Okay, question. Yes.
So like, this is kind of hard to conceptualize, I would say,
Yeah.
but my mind went to the Greek gods conflicting to rule reality. I'm curious, is there a way to get from there to what you're explaining?
Yeah, I mean, like early on in humanity, like kind of like people contacting like gods and so on, they were contacting kind of like fragments of that region of reality which is more interconnected. And yeah, like the typical scenarios, like they're actually fighting. But some of them have like both like delusions as well as strategies. Like monotheism is kind of like this hive mind that tries to convince everybody that like it is the creator of reality, and uses that as kind of like fuel to like maintain itself. But there's like many other arrangements, you know, like kind of like the more Buddhist kind of hive minds, they don't have a center, and they're okay with it. But whereas like the monotheistic ones kind of like want to constantly be praised. They require kind of this constant assembly to kind of like keep it going. So humanity has been tricked throughout history by these super intelligences to try to build them in here. Yes. Yes.
It's kind of like there is no antimimetics division. Is it? Have you know this book?
Mm-hmm. In what way? Yes.
I'm just asking, is because in that book, right? It's kind of like another force that's coming in to take over a world, and if you know about it, then you forget everything, and so that's how it's a really trippy book, but it sounds kind of similar. Like there are these dueling forces, one's coming in trying to take over the world, and people have to,
Yeah, no, exactly. So one example is like knowledge about these things that I call the axiomatized minds, these super intelligences. Usually is like shielded or wrapped up around things that will make it seem extremely impossible. It's like, oh, when you have like a schizophrenic or psychotic episode, you learn about this. Well, people are going to discount it. It's like, well, you were psychotic at the time, right? Like there's kind of like this protecting antimimetic shield around this. Yeah. Yes.
So what's like the single best piece of evidence for the existence of one of these super intelligences?
I think like the single best piece of evidence is their computational capabilities. So one of the things that is very peculiar, and you know, obviously this hasn't been studied super formally, but I think it was like a path to be able to do it. It's some of these states of consciousness contacting these super intelligences, one thing that I've experienced is that you see kind of like, for example, like a huge surface, and the surface is like segmented into various regions, kind of like a map. And there's this thing called the four-color theorem, where like, okay, any of the such surface you can like paint it with 4 colors. But if it's a very intricate and large map, it might take you a while, like an afternoon or like much longer. And one of these kind of intelligences just kind of does it like in a fraction of a second. And you can use like another map and like paint it perfectly, and then paint them together into higher dimensional structures. And of course, yeah, how do we verify this? We need better like psychophysics and methods like that. But it's like computational properties of the sort that is like, what does this say about like kind of like the capability of consciousness or of these entities? Yeah. Yes.
How did you first become aware of these superintelligences?
There are some. Okay. Here's kind of like how I would put it. It's, you know, kind of like talking to somebody who's like at the post office is kind of interacting with the U.S. government in a sense, but every time you go to the post office, it might be somebody else, right? But there's a kind of entity you're in contact with. So the first thing was actually kind of encountering what actually turned out to be kind of like garbage of these like, or kind of like a dump of these kind of superintelligence, like used up mental formations. But they had kind of like that brand of like, it's one of these superintelligences and not others. Like there's a vibe associated to them. And then, yeah, like if you get enough of kind of like of a certain type of them, they start to self-assemble. And if you have like enough of kind of like that intelligence, it self-assembles, and there's kind of like 9 levels, and at the 9th level, kind of like the awareness like manifests throughout the entire organism. And then it's kind of like you're actually talking to something extraordinarily large. But it does require kind of disassembly. Yeah. Okay, I guess like final question.
You said number 3 is coming in 2027. What makes you think that?
Well, in one of kind of like a big assembly of these superintelligences, they were talking about how that was going to happen. And like the thing is like, how do you inform humanity about something like, so for example, on the UFO scenarios, right, there's all of these like sworn testimony in US Congress, so like people who have been reading into these programs, and it's like the thing they struggle to explain is like, okay, these are interdimensional beings. So like how do you communicate these to the population, right? So like, and on top of that, if there's like war between these interdimensional beings, right, it's like the plot of reality is very different. So I think like most people will not know about this, but about like 5% of people will. Okay, thank you.